Hi everyone, Disha here. Welcome to But What Will People Say, a podcast about interracial relationships and the South Asian community. My name's Disha. I was born in Gujarat, India, so I'm Gujarati. And I moved here when I was really young, and I basically grew up in New Jersey. My husband, his name is Michael, he grew up in New Jersey as well. He's Italian and Ukrainian, and we just got married this past July. The inspiration for this podcast really came from other South Asian women in interracial relationships, really just trying to find some support and someone to relate to. And the amount of times Michael and I are out and about and get questions about our relationship, about how my parents took it, how our communities took it, etc. And for a lot of women and men that are in these situations, there's a lot of fear about how their families and this community will take it, or some of it is fear. Some families are very open-minded, but everyone has a story, and this podcast is really a place to explore those stories and the very unique human experience that comes with being in an interracial relationship. And that was the inspiration for this podcast. And I want this to be a place where we can talk about all those things, about religion and culture and kids and fusion weddings and telling our families and all of that good stuff. So the first few episodes of this show are going to be my story with the help of a co-host who you will meet in the first episode. And we're basically just going to have guests of other people in these situations telling their stories. And we hope that you guys who are listening will find something that they can relate to or just learn something new. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
You got it.
Hi everyone, Disha here. And this is But What Will People Say?
But what will people say? I like that title. It's such a dope title.
Yeah, and this is our co-host, Akil.
What's going on? Yeah, my name is Akil. Part of the Indian family, baby. And Disha was telling me about this Facebook group that you've been like messaging them and stuff, right? Everybody in that Facebook group?
Right. So how this podcast got started was I'm in a group called So Weird, which is South Asian women in interracial relationships.
Yeah.
And that's basically a bunch of women in the same position as me and kind of sharing our own experiences, answering questions, stuff like that. And then that was the inspiration for this. So if anyone needs a place to go talk to other women, definitely check them out. They're really great. They're really sweet, and they're just a great resource if you need it.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you even told me about it because, which we'll get into, but like you just breaking the tradition and breaking the norm of being like your typical, not typical, but like just like an average Indian woman in America, right? You kind of like broke that tradition of dating outside the race and stuff like that. So like I think it's really dope because you're kind of setting the precedent and setting this like giving hope to all of those people on that Facebook group, right? And I mean, I guess real quick about me, my name is Akil, as you could tell from what Disha just said. I'm South Indian as well. For all of the people that are South Indian, Telugu, I have family primarily in Hyderabad. I have some in Mumbai. And that's all you really need to know about me because I'm like 99% American and 1% Indian at this point, Seriously. But yeah, I'm excited for this. It'll be super dope. And I have so many questions for you, Disha.
Yeah.
To ask you.
Definitely.
To get to know about your life and your situation. And I'm sure like the people that are listening that know about you kind of already have a grasp of like, kind of already have a grasp about
I feel like
your dating life and somewhat, right? Kind of?
Not really. I don't talk about my personal life.
Really? This is going to be your first time then?
Yeah, this is my first time talking about it. I feel like most people just know like, oh, this is Disha, she's Gujarati, Mike is Italian, it's cool, and now they're married.
Yeah, and I just met Mike. He's freaking cool as fuck. But
yeah.
he's Italian and what though?
Italian and Ukrainian.
Italian and Ukrainian. Okay. So I mean, let's just jump right into it then. Like, you are the hope for all of our listeners.
That's so dramatic. I am not
the hope for all of our listeners.
I think I'm more just becoming the norm, like making it just like not a big deal.
But it is. But that's the thing, though. It is a big deal.
It feels like it, but I don't want it to be.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I just want it to be like, oh yeah. And you definitely like see it more. Like, obviously, like there are all these groups online, which is just all women who have gone out of the South Asian community, but
right.
definitely like in more like everyday life, I stand out a little bit more, but not. I think people are less shocked by it, but there's definitely a lot of like curiosity behind it.
Right.
There's a lot of questions, and like some people will like bulk up the courage to come up and ask you, but not all the time, obviously.
But do you think in like a few years, maybe in like 10, 20 years, it's going to be the norm?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Eventually, people are going to start mixing and
For
and doing all
sure.
that stuff,
No,
right?
it's definitely starting to become the norm.
But that's if they do it, though. That's the most important thing, is that somebody in the family has to break outside of it for it to start, becoming a thing.
For sure. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I guess it seemed more normal because like when we were wedding planning and stuff, a lot of our vendors said like, oh, we have lots of like mixed couples, and like trying to, cater to that demographic, because it is a challenge trying to find a vendor that can handle like an Indian wedding and like a half Italian crowd.
Right.
So I guess it felt very normal
so
being around
unique.
so many vendors that were like, oh yeah, we do this all the time. It's definitely becoming more common.
Yeah.
But I think it's still not like discussed enough.
Mm-hmm.
So like for people who maybe aren't at a point where I am, like I'm married, like, oh, you're just dating, or you're starting to date, or you're in college and you're like exploring the dating world. Like our cultures were not, all of our parents, we had arranged marriages. Like my parents were arranged, all my aunts and uncles. Like we weren't taught like, oh, this is how you go on a date, or this is how you deal with heartbreak, or have a tough conversation, or learn how to argue. Like those weren't things we were ever taught. So like we don't discuss dating in general, let alone dating outside of our culture.
Right.
And stuff
and
like
that's
that.
that's a big thing that we talked about earlier, is like, I think a lot of, I guess, issues or problems would be solved if you were able to just go to your parents about everything, but like everybody's so scared. At least we'll target, particularly when we talk about this stuff, is we'll say Indian community, okay? Because it could be any ethnic group, but particularly Indian families.
Yeah,
it's
Indian
like,
and like South Asian.
It's South
very
Asians,
similar,
right?
a lot of overlap.
Is like, it's not even that we can't, it's not more so that we can't go to our parents and talk to them about these things. It's more so that we feel like they're going to get mad when we talk about these things. And that's not how you want to, like, you want to be able to communicate to your parents and be able to tell them like, hey, listen, like I'm going through something right now. I'm going through this heartache, or I'm going through depression or something like that. Right.
Yeah. There's a lot of things our
and they're
community
just like,
does
depression,
not talk
what is
about.
that? Or heartache, what is that? You'll get over it,
Yeah.
And, but I think a lot of issues would be solved if you were able to communicate with your parents a lot more and be able to tell them like, hey, I'm dating this guy. What do you think about it? And instead of them being like, can I curse on this? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We could bleep it out or something, but sometimes
I
I
don't
might
think,
get passionate.
No, because I'll probably end up, it's fine. It's
yeah,
not a
right.
big deal.
So like, it's like you going up to your parents and be like, hey, I want to be able to tell my parents and like, hey, by the way, I'm dating this girl. Like she's this, instead of them being like, no, the fuck you're not. Like you're not dating no Spanish girl. You're not dating no black, right? Of them being like, okay, like I could understand that. Like cool. Like what is she like? Something like that. And then it'll make everything so much easier that I could just go to them for everything and build some sort of bond with them, right?
Yeah. And I feel like that's something, I mean, personally, I've just left on more of like my responsibility when I eventually have kids.
Right.
I would love to have kids, but like that's more like establishing a relationship where like it's more open and you can talk to me about anything, instead of like the one where I have with, my parents, where most of us were raised like your whole life. It was like, no boys, no boys, no boys, no boys. Where's your boyfriend? When are you going to get married? And it's like,
oh my God.
It like
Literally
that's
the story
literally
of my
how
life
it
right
went.
now.
Like I went to school and like it was like no boys, no, like even guy friends every now and then would be an issue. And then I graduated with my master's degree, and as soon as that happened, it was, oh, so do you have a boyfriend? And it's like, you literally taught me to never even look at a boy, and now I'm supposed to know how to date them and talk to them and build a relationship, and like then come to you and not make it weird that like I have a boyfriend.
Yeah. And then they still kind of get mad in the surface.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, they don't understand dating. So, like, even when you do, their automatic reaction is, oh, so are you getting married? And it's like, no. Like, it's just, there's no, like, in the middle. And I feel like culturally, like, that's just something that is going to die with that generation, which sounds like horrible, but like we can sit there and there's definitely families that
we're American now.
Yeah.
That's a big thing.
Well, I like to think of it as like we're Indian and American, and we have to find that happy balance, and we need to stop using, like, calling someone American as an insult. That's where I have the problem, because you'll hear a lot of like the Indian aunties like throwing their shade in the back, and they're like, oh, she's so American. And it's like, well, I was raised here. Like, yes, I personally wasn't born in the US. I'm Gujarati and I was born in India. But, you know, you'll sometimes hear in our generation, well, they'll be like, oh, well, they're so American. And it's like, well, yeah, but we're American and we're Indian, and it shouldn't be an insult to embrace both sides of it. Because
we're open-minded and we're able to blend in. That's the big thing. It's like, just because I came to America, like, it's not like I'm not going to try to bring in some sort of American values and only be Indian.
Yeah, and
I mean?
there's
I'm not going to forget about my Indian roots either. I'm going to try to blend both.
Good and bad on both sides.
Yeah.
You know, there's things that you want to carry over. Like, I love my culture and the food and the dancing and the music and all of that. But then there's some archaic values that I'm, like, not interested in carrying over. And I feel like the whole child-parent dynamic of, like, you know, you do whatever your parents say and whatever's expected of you, and you don't question them.
Right.
And, you know, especially if you're a woman, like, you're your father's property until you're married, and then you're your husband's property. Like, that can go.
Right.
You know, I'm not gonna, if I have daughters or nieces or anything, I'm never gonna raise them to think that way.
Right.
So Absolutely. Like, you know, you give and take.
So let's jump into I have all these questions for you. You can think of it as like an interview, mainly because like I literally haven't seen you since high school. Like the last time I saw you, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So a lot has changed.
It's been a while.
And all I've been like keeping up with is maybe Instagram, maybe Facebook. And I barely even go on Facebook.
I know. I feel like Facebook's kind of dying out, except for like keeping in touch with family.
Like, I feel old when I go on Facebook, you know?
No, I feel young because I feel like everyone that's active on Facebook is like my parents' age.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm the opposite. I'm like, I can't, this is weird. Like,
but I also feel old. It's like, yo, the only people that are on here are like old people.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, some random people from my high school that I've never spoken to that still put up statuses. But yeah, and then like I saw like pictures of like your now husband, Mike, and I was like, yo, like this is awesome. Let's go. Like that's what I'm talking about. Maybe it's just me being, I don't know. Okay, I don't want to say that like me being more American than Indian, but like I'm still Indian at the end of the day, but I'm Indian American. So like I have a lot of values of being American. Like I've dated outside of, I mean, in all honesty, if the people that are listening really care, I've only dated like one Indian girl my whole life, right? Everybody else was like a mix of like Black, Spanish, East Asian, stuff like that. So when I saw that, I was just proud. I was so happy. I was like, yo, this is dope. I love seeing mixture. I like seeing you going outside of your race and like truly, because okay, this is not true for everybody, but like sometimes the way I look at it is like, when I see like two Indian people marrying in America, it's like, okay, that's cool. Like that's love. Like, you know, but a little part, but when I see like you dating someone that's American, I'm like, I mean, dating somebody that's Italian, Ukrainian, like Mike is, I'm like, yo, that's true love. Like she really, really likes this guy. It wasn't no like, maybe it could be like an arranged situation. No, this is true love. Like you really like this guy and you went against your family kind of in a way against their traditions to be with him.
It wasn't the easy route.
Right.
Because I think regardless, like our generation of like South Asians and Indians and stuff are really like pushing out the arranged marriage. I mean, if it's for you and it's works for you, that's great. Good for you. But I think also taking our kind of independence in the decision of who we marry, and whether that be someone who is also of the same background as you or not, like my parents, they always refer to it as a quote unquote love marriage. That's how they say it. They're like, oh, they had a love marriage. Right. You know, and even just getting our parents' generation to accept that like we can make our own decisions and that we can find someone that we really like and know them for more than 3 minutes and like actually make a more solid decision than one based off like just our parents' input and like, oh, they know someone with a son and like that's it.
So when you know what's funny about that? When you say love marriage, I'm like, in India, let's just say when they say love marriage, right? Because my parents were arranged, but it's funny because they're like, yeah, it was arranged, but like, you know, they let us go on like a few dates to see if we like each other. And I'm like, all right, cool. When I think of love marriage, I'm like, is it really though? Because at the end of the day, yeah, you might like them, but you still have to get confirmation from your families for them to check it out and be like, okay, but does he make good money? Okay, but is he a doctor? Because like, think about it, right? If let's just say hypothetical situation, you're in India or wherever, you fell in love with an Indian guy, but he turned out to be a bum to your parents. You think your parents would really accept that? So like, is it really a love marriage? Like at the end of the day, it's like you still have to kind of get your confirmation.
They referred. So when I say love marriage, they referred to anyone who didn't get an arranged marriage as a love marriage. So they chose their own partner without their parents' input.
Right.
So like basically our whole generation is what my parents call a love marriage. They found their own person. They brought them home. Not to be confused with an arranged marriage, which is the parents organize. They'll try to make it look arranged. Like my cousin in India, like had a girlfriend for like, I think like 8 or 9 years. And she was not Gujarati. She was from another state. And that was enough to cause a fuss.
Right.
And it's like, she's Indian and from India. Was that not enough? And apparently, I mean, they got married and everything's great. They're very happy. But still, the families took it upon themselves to make it socially seem arranged.
Right.
Which, like, if you're from India, like, every state is a different culture. Like, it's very unique. They have their own language, their own tradition, their way they dress. Religion, like, it's all different. And so, like, it was almost silly to see it happen because it's like, we're Gujarati. I don't remember what state she's from, but she's not. She doesn't speak Gujarati, you know.
Let's just say he's Gujarati, she's
and when,
Punjabi or something.
we met their family, it was like, they obviously weren't arranged. Like, they're completely different backgrounds.
Right.
You know, and it was just kind of silly seeing that. And then when it comes to like, I guess my situation with my parents, like there was just no pretending like this was arranged. You know, it was all like Disha made this decision on her own, and that took a lot out of you, or took a lot of your parents, both sides, for you guys to come to some sort of agreement, right? Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of communicating, and I think not, having that like open relationship with my parents.
It's awkward.
It was awkward, but it also like forced the communication. It forced us to learn how to talk to like my parents, but also Mike's parents, and like make them understand what we're saying, because a lot of it does get lost in translation. Because even though like my parents are fluent in English as well, they've lived here for over 20 years, they still like don't understand everything perfectly the way we're saying it. So just like taking the time to explain everything to everybody was a lot.
Yeah, I can understand.
It was exhausting because you felt like you were talking in circles. But I mean, it all like worked out, and like my mom was really great, which surprised me because like, again, not super close to my parents where I like spill out my heart to them all day long. But when I told her, she was immediately like, okay, yeah. Like she went back and forth. She like mulled it over and she simmered in it, and like she would kind of go back and forth. Like some days she had really good days with reactions, and some days she was like really horrible, but it was more balancing out.
But she was way more accepting.
Oh yeah. Like she didn't flip out really at all about it. My dad did. And so like that became like her kind of own battle with my dad, because I'm not really close to him. So just like telling him to like I don't even want,
because my mom is the same thing. It's like, even in high school with my first girlfriend, like she was Sri Lankan and Catholic, so like my mom was like cool about it, because like all she cares about, my mom cares about like the simplest things, which is like, is she nice, and does she like kind of have the ability to learn how to cook in the future? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like when I introduced her, she was like, I like this girl, like she's really nice. And then even to this day, she'll ask about her and be like, hey, where's so and so at? And I'm like, dude, she's living her own life. But that's the thing. I don't want my mom to have to go through that battle with my dad alone. You know what I mean? Because I want to be there with her to be like, hey, explain it to him, and I'll be there to explain it too, to back you up, because he's stubborn and he's not gonna. And then she might get influenced, or like she might try to battle with him, and then he gets stern a little bit, and then she's like, all right, you know what, I'm done. But I'm not gonna have that. It's more so like, I want you to talk to him. Maybe you might get through to him more than I can or something, but I'm still gonna be there to back you up. And so that you don't have to go through this alone. Yeah, your TV's tripping out, bro. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're doing this in my living room, so if you hear my dog bark in the back, that's because we're at my place.
All right, so I want to ask the first question, which is something that I don't even know. How did you and Mike meet?
So we met on Tinder
Nice.
because that's
Okay.
like the cool new thing to do. But back then it was kind of weird. It wasn't that long ago. It was
I
actually
mean,
when
they ruined Tinder, by the way,
they
because
did.
they're like always like it's a hookup app, and it's like it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't.
They literally created a whole new dating app to like keep Tinder as a hookup app. Now they got Bumble. You know what I mean? It's like
Right.
Tinder is for hooking up guys, and then now we have Bumble if you want to
Bumble is
actually
like
take it
the-
seriously. It's
I
like
think
what?
like Bumble is preached as like the feminist app because the girls have to message first and like guys
Right,
can't
right.
send
Which I
you
think
like
is really cool, by
nasty
the way.
text messages and stuff because it like definitely Tinder was like the jungle. It was like guys.
Everybody blew you up.
Yeah,
Everybody
like,
blew up.
and
your
the thing
message.
is, like, when you're a girl on these apps, like, I feel like when you're a dude, it could be like either like, yeah, you get all these matches, but it's like crickets. Because like girls will never message you first. Maybe
Right.
sometimes. I don't know. I'm not a dude. But like when you're a girl, it's like sometimes you wonder, does like every guy just swipe right? Like, do you even like give a shit? And so like you would get horrible, like really dirty text messages. And then a lot of guys would just say hi, which was boring, at least personally. And then you'd get the guys who'd at least shoot you a line, you know, work off the very little information you got off a Tinder profile, which at the time was like a few pictures
Yeah.
and like my little Tinder bio, which I'm pretty sure said like,
like-
yoga, cooking, and
then the
adventure
school
or
you went
something
to.
basic
Yeah.
like that. It was horrible. And, you know, one of the pictures is like me doing like a dorky yoga pose or something. And so based off that, Mike messaged me and his first line was, if you teach me yoga, I'll love you forever. And I was like, this kid's
Hey.
yeah. I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. Whatever. But yeah, so that's how we met. And then we had our first date. We went for coffee because we were both very broke grad students at the time.
Right.
And so,
Wait, but before you even go into that, save that. When he messaged you, were you like kind of like already head over heels, or were you kind of like, who is this guy and why is he messaging me? Like, at first,
I just kind of like laughed and like I didn't really think anything of it. I was at the time like just kind of getting back in the dating game,
Right.
Because I had just started. I was a year deep in grad school, and I have a master's in occupational therapy. But grad school is a lot. It's very time consuming. It's your whole life. It's like a full-time job.
on top of a job.
Yeah, on top of like me working on weekends to like pay for gas and stuff and commuting. And so I wasn't really dating because so many of my relationships had just gone south because I was in grad school and
Right.
most guys just like didn't really understand and like didn't get what a time commitment it was or like want to deal with someone who was a student, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Whatever. And so I was kind of like done looking for anything too committal. That makes
Right.
me sound like I was just looking for a hookup, but like,
No. I
you
understand.
know,
Trust me.
I was just kind of like dating for the sake of dating to like do something besides studying for
Right.
school.
You
I
just
was
want
in
some company.
I
Yeah.
was in summer school, and so yeah, we kind of just decided like, oh, let's get coffee and like hang out, and like there's no pressure for anything, which is what I really like about our relationship. Is it there was no pressure for like, oh, where is this going? What is this going to lead to? What do we want here? Because like I think we were both in a place where like we're both in grad school. We're just kind of hanging out. Let's see what happens. Like, neither of us is like looking for a relationship because like there were always those like profiles on these apps where like people will, say like, oh, I'm looking for a serious relationship, or you know, I'm looking for my forever person. And I was just kind of like, no, I just want to go to to Chipotle and like hang out.
Right.
Like,
Of course. Yeah.
I
yeah.
didn't. I
Yeah.
didn't want a relationship. I was like, no, we're just gonna like play the field and like see what happens. And yeah, so it was very chill.
I mean, like at what point? Like now, this is fast forwarding. Like when you guys actually start to like somewhat take it seriously, where you're like, okay, this is kind of an exclusive thing. Mike is my boyfriend now, and we're starting to take it seriously. At what point were you starting to have those thoughts of like, what will my parents think? Like, are they gonna give me like a huge like a battle of this? Like, how am I gonna take it to them? You know, all those thoughts that you're gonna have.
I think part of me didn't really think too hard about it because I've definitely dated like South Asian guys and also like outside of that, but I have always kind of been more drawn to not South Asian men. That
Right.
was just my thing, and like part of it was just
I guess I'm the same, right? Yeah. I would say I'm the same.
Yeah, I think part of it was like I didn't want to deal with like these like super like Indian guys who just like wanted a housewife or were like, and like even though
They're
maybe
still out there, even in America.
that's still a thing where they're just like douchey and like they don't
Typical.
like they think you're like God forbid you have too many opinions or you like want to focus on your career. Like not all of them, obviously I'm generalizing, but a lot of them were like, even though like they were super nice, like it would always somehow lead back to like at the end of the day, like I just want like someone who can make me Indian food and like whatever. And I was like, all right, bye. And then my other idea in my head at the time was, even if I find like the quote unquote most like whitewashed Indian guy I could find, like super like progressive, like all pro whatever Disha wants to do with her life.
Wait, whoa. I'm progressive, but does that make me whitewashed?
I don't know. That's just my phrase. I don't have anything
American
better.
washed?
I feel like that's what we call it, like Indian kids that aren't like super, super traditional. Like,
Is it? Okay.
that's what I got called, and I don't know if that was an insult. I was just like, yeah, whatever.
Damn. Okay.
But even if I found that, like someone who was super progressive and all that, I was still gonna have to deal with their family, and that wasn't gonna change.
The
like
judgment.
the judgment of like, oh, you're his wife now, like you have to like serve him food and like you have to act like this and dress like that. And it's like I was so suffocated by that growing up because like I had a very conservative upbringing. Like my parents wouldn't let me dress a certain way or hang out with guys by myself sometimes, or like all these things that to me were just like taking away my independence. Like my mom never wanted me to move out. I grew up and I did, but like I was just taught that like you lived at home forever and then you like got married and
Until
that was
pass you off.
yes,
to
like your
family.
biggest accomplishment in life was like who you got married to, and that you got married and had babies, and like as a woman that's what you were gonna do.
Yeah, and that's not success because like the way you make it seem is like their success is your husband's success.
Yes,
and that's
exactly.
that's not the truth. It's like I have my own independence and I want to like it's like at that point it's like what's the point of you guys making me do good in school and get like an undergrad and a master's degree? Like I want to do this for myself and I want to be successful on my own. But like
right, and even that like what I went to school for and like getting a degree and all that was like to make you appropriate for marriage, like to make you desirable. Like my mom would always say like, oh, you can't cook, no one's gonna marry you. And I'm like, okay.
It's like, look, I mean, it'd be nice like if my girl had a master's degree, but it's like that's not really what's gonna hold me from wanting to date her or not. It's more like, look, if you're in community college or if you're in whatever school, it doesn't really matter as long as you have ambition at the end of the day. Like, do you want to be successful? Like, and are you doing something that you love to do? Yes. Okay, cool. If that checks off, then like, all right, we're good. That's all that really matters, at least for me, right? So like, let's fast forward a little bit now, right? So when did you meet his parents versus when did you introduce him to your parents, to your family?
So Mike introduced me to his mom like 2 or 3 weeks in. He was like, this is my mom and this is my brother. And blah, blah, blah.
It's so casual. And
yeah,
you're
like
sitting
super
there like, what
cash. Like we were like on our, literally I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks into like having met him, like nothing serious was going on. I think we were like headed into the city.
Yeah.
And he was just like, oh yeah, just like meet me at my house. And I'm like,
it's like, are you sure?
I was like,
is it okay?
Yeah, I'm like, did you ask your mom? Literally, I was like, did you ask your mom? And he's like, why would I ask my mom? Like, and we're just going out. And I'm like, and I was so like, it's funny, like there's so many moments like that where I had to remind myself, it's like, you had a totally different upbringing than me, like I wasn't even allowed to like invite my friends over without asking my mom first, like I have to be like, hey, like, can I have my friends over? And like, she would have to decide and forget introducing boys. Like there was never like, oh yeah, this is the guy I'm dating. We're just like hanging out. Like, are you kidding? That would never, ever happen. And so, yeah, he was quick on that. And even then he was just like, yeah, this is the girl I'm dating. Her name's Disha. Like, nice to meet you, whatever. And then with me, Mike was a secret for about 3 years.
Damn.
Maybe a little more or less. I don't really remember.
See, that's the beauty of being Indian is like we know how to make it work. We know how to hide you really well.
You know what blows my mind is how Indian parents are totally cool with you lying to them for years about where you've been and what you've been doing, as long as at the end of the day there might be a husband or a wife.
Is it? Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
I feel like I could lie to my mom all day as long as I've eaten at the end of the day. She's like, "Did you eat at least?" Like I could literally be in like a nuclear war and she'll be like calling me. She'll be like, "Where are you right now? Where are you?" I'll be like, I don't know. I'm in a battlefield." She'll be like, "Did you eat?" And I'll be like, "Yeah." She'll be like, "All right, cool. I'll talk to you later."
yeah.
Boop.
I love
Yeah.
how casual they are about like, because at no point, like, you know, in this entire process has my mom ever been like, so you spent 3 years lying to me about who you were hanging out with, and what. She has never once questioned it.
Really? Okay. Yeah,
Never.
I could honestly
She's
like. I'm
never
thinking about
been like,
it. Yeah.
I can't believe you didn't tell me. Like, I would be so upset if my
Yeah, my mom would
future
ask
unborn
questions. Yeah.
kids did
She'd be like,
that.
"When did you meet her?"
Yeah, 'cause
like,
at
she'll
the end
never
of-
be like, "You never told me."
Yeah, at the end of the day, it was all like, well, but now she has a husband, and so like it cancels everything out.
Right. So like so you introduced him 3 years into the relationship.
Yes.
And how was that communication between your boyfriend at the time to your parents? And, like individually, like literally break it down. Him communicating to your mom versus him communicating to your dad. Because I know it's a huge difference. Can I turn on the light somewhere here?
Yes.
I feel like I'm talking to
it's
you
getting
in like pitch dark.
Yeah, the sun's going down. So just all of them. There you go. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I
Because
don't
I know
know.
I
That's
asked
like
that because
so-
it's a
that's a-
huge difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Mike was super understanding in being kept a secret because one of his best friends growing up was Indian, and he spent most of his high school years covering for him while he was out with his girlfriend. So like his friend would be like, "Oh, I'm going out with Mike," but he would be out with his girlfriend, and Mike would have to cover for him.
Right.
Because he like, you know, and then so he already understood the whole like dating dynamic of like South Asian
people
kids,
yeah, South Asians,
not telling their parents. So he kind of was like, again,
he was cool
Mike
about it.
is very cool and very chill, and so he didn't need a ton of explaining because he'd already sort of been there on, you know, just as a friend.
Which is awesome.
So I lucked out. I got really lucky on that because I definitely had dated guys in the past who like weren't sure how that was gonna go, because they would be like, "Oh, so like, would they be okay with you dating me?" And I would honestly have to be like, "Probably not, but we'll figure it out then."
Right.
We'll figure that one out later. How about we get through if I like you first?
Yeah.
But Mike was just like, "Yeah, whatever. Like, it's cool," and he like totally understood. So that was nice.
Which is like a relief. Because
Yeah.
it's like, yo, like, because I don't want to put you through this, but like I could understand if you don't want to be with me because I have to hide you constantly, and I know how annoying that could get, and like, well, in my case, like being a guy is like sneaking you in at night just to hang out or something stupid like that. It's like, I don't want you to have to go through that, but like, just try to understand, like, this is how it is. I know that you don't have to live like this because your parents are super cool about it, but like, hopefully you can understand. And then once they're like, I understand, yeah, cool, like whatever, take all the time you need about.
He grew up around a lot of like other like South Asian kids, so like he has friends who have had arranged marriages.
Yeah.
He's seen, you know, he's been around them. He knows the culture a little bit. So when he started dating me, he just kind of got it.
Yeah.
And so when so the way I told my parents was, I had all my cousins come with me. So I brought all my cousins. They came over my house, and we sat down my mom and just like told her. Because that way at least I had a backup system, because like they were
you had like an intervention.
Yeah, we essentially had an intervention. Okay. We like sat down my mom, but before,
I love how you started with your mom first, though.
Yeah, because
that was the easy route.
Yeah, that's the easy route.
The easy part out of the way.
I also very much like don't really have a relationship with my dad. Like we haven't talked in I don't know how long. So I didn't care what he thought. And so whatever. But before that happened, before I told my mom even, I was kind of casually bringing Mike around.
Right.
In the sense that like, so my mom, like most Indian moms, is like all about shoving food down people's throats.
Right.
Like she loves when people eat her food and is like, "Well, this is so good, auntie, thank you." And so like I would play the card like, "Oh, like my white friend like really likes Indian food, and like maybe you can make him some, mom. He'll come over for lunch one day." And so like a handful of times he like came by as my friend and had lunch essentially
it's
with
like
my
your
mom.
way of like kind of sneaking acceptance.
Yes,
from your mom.
and I was kind of just like, I don't know.
Which is like a very tactical way to do it.
It was
Like,
very
it's awesome.
calculated because I was like, you like anyone that likes your food. So here we go.
I'm going to do that with Arya. I'm going to bring her over and tell my mom, be like, hey, Arya wants to learn how to make Indian food. And she'll be like, I like her already.
Of course. Yes, bring her over. Yeah, so that kind of worked pretty well. So by the time we brought up that like Mike was my boyfriend, my mom kind of already knew.
Right.
She literally was like, I know. She goes, he's the only boy you've ever brought around. And I'm like,
Wow.
oh, you make it seem as if I was ever allowed to just like
It's
have
wow, you're magically cool about it now.
Yeah,
Okay.
like let's not act like you would be cool with me just like hanging out with my guy friends all the time.
Right.
You know, I had a handful from when I was younger that my mom could care less that we hung out, but like new guys, it was like,
Right.
You know, because it was like, oh, you're like a teenager, or you're a 20-something now. Like they can't just be your friend. It's not a thing.
Yeah, that's so funny. Earlier when you said about like basically your whole school life, teenage life, your parents are always like, no girls, no guys, right? And then as soon as you get, well, for my situation, for you, it was when you like finish your master's and everything. That's when your parents were like, so like, where's your boyfriend? Like, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's so, but like for me, it was as soon as I got a job, because like I did horrible in school. Like I take no shame, 2.3 GPA gang, let's go. But like, I did horrendous in Rutgers, right? And then I got a job at this really reputable insurance company, and even my dad had to like double check to be like, you got into this? I'm like, he's like, but you didn't do good in school. I'm like, yeah, it's all about who you know, not what you know. It's about communication. That's when he started, like, he brought me into the room, into the living room, and he was like, so like, he's like, yeah, you know, you're 24. You got this great job. You got great benefits. Yes, obviously bring up the benefits, right? And then he's like, so like, you know, where's your girlfriend? Like, when are you going to get married? And before I even say anything, he's like, because I have this whole plan for you. Like, I want to get you married by 25. I want you to have kids by 27 and you move out by 29. And I'm just like, I'm sitting there like kind of chuckling because I'm just like, should I tell him now or later that I don't even date Indian girls? Like, should I bring that up that I don't? And I told him that. And you know the funny thing about my dad is, and you know, people listening, maybe you might relate to this because dads think that they're honestly, they think they're hilarious. Is he backtracks. So when I like kind of attack him in a little bit, and I'm just like, I'm like, I don't even like Indian girls, right? And he'll be like, oh, did I say Indian? I just said like at least religion, like at least I don't care who you date as long as they're Hindu. And I'm like, are you serious? Are you freaking serious? You don't want me to, you don't care if I date Indian girls, but you want them to be Hindu? Like, how does that even make sense, bro? And I want to bring that up because I literally went through the same thing of like, your parents have this plan for you without realizing that you're your own adult by the time they want to bring all of that up, right? Mike was being loud.
Michael is now closing all the blinds.
Rightfully so. He was playing video. He was watching sports. Go sports.
Go team. He doesn't like sports.
Oh, you don't? Oh, okay.
No, I was just talking about brother.
But yeah, so I actually, so speaking about Mike and all that stuff, right?
I'm so bad at this.
It's okay. All right, so let's move on to something that I did want to ask because it's actually very important. Is when you guys started dating, right, and you guys started hanging out and stuff, maybe taking them to like certain events or whatever it may be. Like, how has like the reception been so far when you guys go out? Like, do people stare at you? Do people judge you? I can imagine, especially if you took them to like an Indian event.
Well, like, I feel like we're pretty lucky. Like, we live in New Jersey, which is pretty densely populated with like South Asians and Indians. So it's not like, you know, odd to see other Indian people. Like, there's definitely parts of this country where they're like, you're brown. And, you know, you stick out. You stick out like a sore thumb. But here, it's a little less. But definitely when we go to like Indian events, we don't really get stares unless we're in like a very blatantly like, Indian
densely
environment.
Indian populated. Like Garba.
Yeah, like if we
one.
Right, we went to Garba recently, or if we go to a temple, well, like people will kind of stare. In the temple, it was a lot of staring.
Is it because of the religion? It's probably the religion.
I think so, because it's like, you know, in other like Indian events, you'll see like every now and then you'll see people who aren't Indian that are there. But when it comes to like temple and stuff, it's like you rarely ever do. And we were there talking to the priest about right before the wedding, and my parents were there, and like like blatant staring.
Yeah.
Not even looking away if we stared back. Did not stop for a second until our conversation with that man was over. But nothing negative, just like curiosity.
Right. Right. More so like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
Why is he here? Who is he with?
Yeah, like, oh, this is different.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Right.
And because when we're
but
in
it's also
like
judging though. It's not like curiosity, like in a healthy curiosity. Like if I was in a temple and I saw a white guy there, I'd be like, well, first I'd be like, this is cool.
That's
like,
different.
This is dope. But my curiosity would be like, oh, like it'd be like, who is he here with? Like,
yeah,
you know, that's kind of cool. Is he Hindu? Like, but like I feel like other conservative Indian people would be looking at it in a judgy way. And like, oh, why is he here? You know?
The thing is, we've never had like anyone come up to us and say anything like negative. It's all been pretty positive, like the response. It's more, I think we were just raised with so much fear that like, what will people say if you marry someone who's not Indian? What will, you know, our community say? Like, what will people think if we just like let you go out and like hang out with boys and do whatever you want? Like,
right.
And so in our head, we like live with the fear of judgment that like our parents almost like put on us.
Right.
But
I mean, they base all of their learning experiences through fear, which is ridiculous.
Yeah. So like the reality didn't really match what we were taught to think would happen.
Right.
And it was funny because our priest was like the most like
chill,
almost open-minded of all of them. Like,
which is awesome.
When we told, you know, he met Mike and he was like super excited to meet us, and he was like, oh, so like how long have you guys known each other, or like how long have you been together? And we said, you know, at the time it was about 4 years. And he was like, good, that's great, I'm so happy like you guys are making like this decision. Like marriage is like such an important part of society, blah blah blah. But also like, you know, my generation, people got married after 2 weeks and like things would go south and our community doesn't talk about it and they just act like everything's fine and
right.
They don't believe in divorce and stuff. But like,
damn, you
really,
bring that
you
guy
have
in
to.
Your podcast.
Yeah, he was awesome. He was like, I'm so happy you guys are, you know, you took the time to really get to know each other and make sure you found like a life partner that's right for you. And, you know, we were there to discuss like other bits and pieces. Like we had our ceremony was done in English.
Right.
And stuff. So translating bits and pieces, changing whatever we wanted. And just the priest getting to know us a little bit. So he wasn't just walking in blind.
I think that's really dope.
But he was awesome, and I was so worried that we would have a hard time finding a priest that would like do a wedding for a mixed couple. But it turns out most of the priests are like very chill and are not fussed at all, and if anything are more open-minded than our parents, because I don't know, maybe it's because they're getting paid, I don't know, but they seem
maybe it could just be that priest, because like, or maybe I've just never spoken to priests
we've
about
never
something
spoken
like that. That's
to
the thing.
the
That's
priest
probably a big
because
thing.
I feel like, at least with me, I wasn't raised, I'm not like super religious, and I would go to temple, but you never like sat down and like talked to the priest. It was like they did the prayers, everyone else went, you did arti and all that stuff, but you didn't like, you would never go up to the priest and ask them like, what is your opinion on interracial relationship? Like most of them are like, he was totally, you know, all in for it. He's like, this is great, like you seem like a wonderful person, and like as long as he treats you well, like that's all that matters, and that you guys have mutual respect for each other. That's the most important thing. And I was so surprised by that, because I expected him to be like, you know, this is an uphill battle, and like right. He doesn't know our culture, and like how much do you know about religion? And instead that's not what we got. So that was really cool.
But then again, like, why would he say that type of stuff? Being a stranger, you know?
I feel like because priests were almost portrayed as like the advice givers.
Yeah.
And I feel like my parents were always like, you know, this is what our Hindu scripture teaches us, and like making it seem like the priest said this is what is and isn't allowed.
That is true. I feel like priests would probably speak on behalf of our parents. I feel like our parents will let the priest speak on behalf of them.
Yeah.
So like, if anything, go to the priest. You know, he knows best, right?
Yeah.
Right. So here's a good question: is like, what has being in a mixed relationship taught you? The biggest like life lesson. And this is something that's important because it could relate the message back to your listeners.
I think for us, communication, because we do have such different upbringings, and being forced to like not just assume that like Mike understands why I'm doing something a certain way, or oh, this holiday is coming up, or like I don't wear shoes in the house and like now Mike doesn't wear shoes in the house, and like just being able to communicate my point of view to him and him doing the same thing. Or why is something important to me? Like, oh, why is it important that like we celebrate a certain holiday and things? It's like, first I have to explain to him like, what is this holiday and why do we do this and blah blah. It's not just taken for granted that like, oh, you grew up the same way as me, you know why Diwali is important, or why we go to Garba, or why we dress a certain way and blah blah blah.
I mean, you're thinking about that. I was thinking about more so like, why did I have to hide you for 3 years in the first place?
Yeah, also things like that, like things about our community and our culture, like has to be explained to him, like all of that.
Yeah.
Like why I didn't bring guys over my house, why I couldn't just like sleep over his house without like coming up with this elaborate lie of where I was the night before, like saying I'm at my friend's house and like stuff like that. Sorry, Mom. I don't think she's listening, but yeah, definitely just everything. We have to talk about so many things because I don't know how to put it, like how he would bring me over super nonchalantly and just be like, my mom's white, she doesn't care.
Right.
Whereas I'd be like, I'm never telling my parents about you unless we're married or getting married.
But it all comes down, not only does it come down to like communication between you and your partner, but it's mainly the communication that was built up between him and his parents that he was able to even do that in the first place, and between the communication between you and your parents, right? Because the only communication you've had with your parents is all based around fear. Communication between him and his parents was based around understanding and taking the time to know why certain things are certain things. Right.
And also just being treated differently by our parents. Like Mike was raised by, and I think this is also just true for guys even in the South Asian community, where like your parents see you as like an individual. Like you grow up and then like you get a job and like you can make your own decisions and you can take care of yourself, and like who you date is up to you and blah blah blah. Whereas I feel like when you're a girl, like you're almost eternally seen as like a child, and you are your parents' property, and everything you do is a reflection of them,
right?
And you're solely responsible for that. And when I was like tell my mom like, oh, I want to move out, she would automatically be like, you can't move out, you're a girl. Like that was her automatic.
Right, that's a big difference.
Yeah, or like, oh, I'm gonna go out, with my friends, and she's like, well, what time are you gonna come home? Like, how late are you staying? Who are you going with?
Yeah,
I mean, but when you were a guy,
I think that's overprotectiveness too as well.
Yeah, but like
women are very vulnerable, and like, I mean, I would kind of be the same way. It's like, I don't want my daughter going out late at night because with
that's
guys,
so backwards though. Like I get it, but it's like you have to.
But it's not because that's property, like not at all. It's more so like that's just me being overprotective, because it's like if I had a son, it's like I know he could protect himself. With a woman, it's like there's freaks out there on the streets, and like I don't want them like doing anything, and like I could never picture, or I'm scared that I would have to picture like them doing something, and that's the thing, it's like they're a little bit more vulnerable.
Yeah, I get it, but I think like even just being treated like you can take care of yourself, and like maybe not going out late at night, whatever, like be smart, go out the group, blah blah blah.
Exactly.
But like, why can't I move out? Why can't I move?
The moving out thing is ridiculous.
I told my mom when I graduated that I was gonna graduate college and I was gonna move to California. She goes, "You don't know anyone in California. What are you gonna do in California?" I'm like, "I'm just gonna move there. I'm gonna live by myself." And she's like, "Who's gonna take care of you?" And it's like, "I'm gonna take care of me." And just like the constant like you'll never be anything without a man to take care of you.
Right.
Because, and like, that's something that's changed now that I'm married. That is almost annoying, that like suddenly there are no questions. Nobody cares what I do or who I hang out with or anything. My parents are just like, you're his problem now. And it's just like, nobody, even just like traveling alone. Like if I was like, oh, I'm going to go on a girls trip with my friends. Like it was like, no, you can't do that. You're a girl. Girls don't do that. And it's like, I mean, no, that's just like that level of like being treated like an independent adult.
Right.
Just never, I feel like for women, happens in our culture. It's just like you need a guy to take care of you, or you need your parents to take care of you, but you can't just like go off and do whatever on your own. Right.
With my thing is like me wanting to move out of my parents' house, like it's so, and I could understand like your entire fan base attacking me for this, because I know they're gonna be like, oh, you have the best of both worlds, or like you have the best life ever. Because it's like when me wanting to move out, my mom is more worried about like how are you gonna eat? Like, how are you gonna fend for yourself in that aspect, right? So it's like for you, for Indian women, when they want to move out and they tell their parents, their parents are always like, oh, who's gonna take care of you? Like, are you not? Do you have a man to take care of you? Da da da,
Yeah.
which is ridiculous. For me, it's kind of the same way, flipped. It's like, who's gonna feed you? Who's gonna like?
Yeah.
How are you gonna eat? How do you have a wife
But
to feed you? Like,
I think
and I'm
for
like, that's ridiculous.
guys, it's almost like they're worried that like, you know, you don't have a wife and whatnot, but like they know that like he's a guy and I'm not going to be able to stop him from making that decision. Like if you,
That's what I was just about to say.
you know,
That's a big thing.
if you decided like I'm going to move out, mom, or I'm going to marry this girl or whatever, it's almost an idea of like, well, I can't stop him. Like he made his decision. Whereas if you're a girl, like they almost act like I'm going to make you change your mind.
Right. Because is it that like parents feel like with their daughters they could chastise them more or something like that? Because it's like it comes to a point where like the man grows up, they could be able to stand up to their dad. You know, I think it all falls around. Is it weird for me to think it all falls under the dad at the end of the day? It's
I
like,
mean,
that's
yeah,
like
I feel like guys are still very much seen as like the head of the household, but
Right.
there's like this guilt that they induce. Like when you're a girl, they put all like, oh, well, like how can you do this to your family? How
Oh,
can you do this to your mom?
Yeah.
How
yeah,
can
my dad does
you
that all the time.
do this to our community? Like that
Yeah,
family
yeah.
induced guilt is so real.
Yeah.
And you know, when
But it
you
doesn't
wa-
work for me though.
you love your parents and you want to make them happy, but what I've just learned is like eventually you have to like draw the line in the sand and decide like I am a person and you can accept that, and I'm an independent person. I'm going to make my decisions and it's going to be fine. Like
I mean, I'd rather ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. Right?
and I think that's part of where my mom almost took it better than I expected, because I was always that kid. I was the kid who just like flipped the table and would apologize later.
Right.
You know, like, because what I did, like, I literally went and told my mom about Mike being my boyfriend, and then 2 weeks later I moved out.
Right.
Like, within a month, I was just like, fuck it. Like,
Yeah.
because I just decided, like, now, like, Mike, one, is worth me fighting for. Like, you're gonna build a bridge and get over it.
Right.
All right? And eventually you will. Like, I just told myself, I'm like, listen, my dad might never talk to me again, and I'll be fine with that. Like, we don't talk anyway. But with my mom, I was like, you have to love me forever.
Yeah,
Eventually, you will have to come around.
Right, of course.
Maybe it'll be when I have kids, you'll come around. But I never really, really thought that, like, my mom was going to, like, kick me out of the house and disown me.
Right.
I definitely had those thoughts, but I never really trusted my mom to follow through with it. Because, like, growing up, I know my mom, and she is full of empty threats.
My mom loves me too much to like ever like.
Yeah,
like
and
that.
I
But I
understand, like,
respect her enough to like, you know.
yeah, and there's definitely people out there who like genuinely have this fear that like they will be disowned by their families if they decide to, you know, marry outside of their community.
Do what they want.
And that's easy to say, but when you really put it on the table, like you could lose your whole family. And if you are willing to take that risk, it's still a lot of burden and it's a lot of pressure. But eventually, like, me, I was just like, my whole life was like your typical like Indian girl making her parents happy. Like, I got great grades in school, AP honors classes all through high school, you know, went to college, like got my master's degree, went into the medical field. Like, I did everything. I checked all the boxes, you know, and then I was like, if I'm going to pick one thing to just like, I'm going to do whatever I want, even if it's not what you want, it was Mike.
Right.
I was like, I'm going to have to fight this battle if this is what I want. And I'm going to have to put my foot down and we're going to draw the line in the sand. And I think it's okay to draw boundaries with your parents. It's not something that's obviously our parents encourage because they think, you know, like they own you at a certain point. But I think you have to stop feeling guilty for drawing the line and saying like, nope, this is what I'm doing. You can all get on board or, you know, go talk to your therapist.
Yo,
I don't know.
With disowning, it's like, it's ridiculous because it's like, why do I have to beat myself up and be guilty for my parents being stubborn? Like, how could I beat myself up for wanting to be happy? You know, it's like I'm going out and wanting to date a girl that I really like, But now I'm fearing it, and I might have to break off this great relationship that I truly it's a relationship where I truly love somebody because my parents are not accepting it because they're putting the fear in my head.
It's bad because
that they want to destroy this relationship between us because I want to be happy. Like, dude, fuck that.
Because,
you know?
But they weren't raised in that. They weren't raised in a world where like them being happy mattered. Like it was them making their parents proud.
Right.
That's what it was.
This is gonna sound, maybe I shouldn't even say it, but like, fuck it. I'm speaking for myself. You guys could agree. You guys don't have to. The way I look at it in like the most cynical way is that like, look, your parents are not always gonna be there, and like life, like we all eventually like leave Earth and stuff. But, like the worst thing that you could possibly do is like you make your parents happy, they don't accept it, and like later on they get too old, or like you lose all contact with them, or they pass away or something like that, and now you're like, and then you realize it's too late because you've dated somebody to make them happy, and they're not even there anymore, or something happens like you lose a whatever it is, you know what I mean, and then it's too late for you to go back because your parents are not there for you to make them happy anymore. So now you're with this person that you didn't even want to be with, and now you're kind of like in this space.
And I think a lot of
regret.
There's a lot of people, I think, in the South Asian community that, again, you like pick and choose, like, what are you willing to compromise on? And like, because our parents weren't raised in like happiness is the goal, like go chase your dreams, honey. Like that's not how we were raised. It was about making your parents proud, and them, you know, they'll say things like, you know, I picked up my whole life and moved to America for my family and to give you a better future, and this is how you're going to treat me. Like you're going to bring home this like random person and like not do this. But it's
like, did you like, you even hearing that though, right? And you saying it, doesn't that sound so ridiculous? Because like, what is, yes, but I'm still going to be successful. I'm still going to like, if that's what you guys care about is bringing money to the table, I'm still going to do that. You guys raised me right. I still got a job. I still got a degree. In your case, master's degree. But like the one thing that you guys
and that's
think
what I
is going to
chose.
break everything
this
is
is
me
my one
dating
thing.
some girl.
Yeah. This was my one thing, because you know what? And I'm not the only one in this position where we went to school and, I went down the medical field. I'm an occupational therapist, and I don't care about my career.
Right.
I'll probably won't be an OT forever because I did this career just to make my parents happy, because if I told my mom I wanted to go to school for like art and design or interior design or cooking school, which is what I really wanted to do, like
she'd be like, what money is in that?
Right. And it wasn't going to make them happy. And so instead I'm kind of like in this like awkward limbo, which a lot of other women I know are in, where it's like, okay, we do this job because this is what we went to school for and it makes our parents happy. And then on the side, we have this like other creative endeavor hobby. So there's no pressure on it. And I do the same thing with my like little food Instagram and my blog and whatnot. But it's like, if it were up to me and if it was just based on my happiness and like not worrying about what my parents thought, I would have just gone to culinary school and called it a day.
Exactly. But the great thing about it is like, okay, can't go back in time. Fine, whatever. You're an occupational therapist.
And the thing
now.
is,
You're an
I
OT.
was like, well, I'll still always have a job and I'll make a comfortable living, and the worst thing that's going to happen from it, I'm going to do a career change.
Not even that. The way I look at it is like, okay, fine. You're an OT now. You made your parents happy. Now it's time to make yourself happy. Take that money that you make from being an OT, put it into being a culinary specialist or something like that. Put it into your food Instagram.
Right.
Put it into your hobby to make that your career now.
Yeah.
You could ditch the OT thing. That's
Exactly.
the way I look at it.
And I was kind of like, you know what? I did all those things. I did everything right. I made my parents happy. But I can't go back on ending up with someone that I don't see myself with forever, or the wrong person. And I was like, I know myself better than anyone else, as much as we're raised to think our parents know us better than anyone. And I was like, nope, this is the battle I'm going to pick. And the decision has already been made on my end, like about Mike. And I think it was rough because when I introduced him, he was just my boyfriend. We were not engaged. We weren't any of those things.
Right.
And so my mom had a really hard time understanding, like, okay, now what?
Right.
And I was like, he's just my boyfriend. That's all. Like, we're dating. And
but
like,
the way they look at it is like, okay, but what is that going to lead to?
Right.
Marriage? Like, you know what I mean?
And that was a conversation like we had to have, like Mike and I, before I even brought him
into the house,
into my
it's
parents'
like, hey,
lives.
be prepared to like
Like,
you
one,
know,
my
have
parents
my
are going to be like,
parents
yeah, my parents are going to be like,
attack
oh, so
you.
like, when are you getting married? Even though
Boom.
we're just dating.
Exactly.
But also that really awkward conversation of, hey, so where's this going?
Right.
You know, like, are we eventually going to end up together? And so, you know, we had talked about getting married and whatever eventually, but I told him, I was like, as long as you think that, like, this is forever, I'll introduce you to my family.
Right.
I didn't put the pressure on him to propose or get married in any immediate sense. I was just like, as long as that one day will happen, I'll put
Then I'm
up the fight
comfortable.
in the
Yeah.
meantime.
Right.
And so I introduced him. I was like, he's my boyfriend. And I made sure I didn't just like say it and then let them forget about it. I brought Mike around like constantly.
Right.
He was
right.
always over for lunch. He would always pick me up and we would go out places. I would at that point, once I told my mom about him, I refused to ever lie to my mom about that again. I was like, even if you don't like it, I'm just going to tell you, oh, we're going to dinner tonight. Oh, we're going to the movies. Oh,
But it
he's
makes
coming
you feel
over.
so much better though, because
Yeah,
so much
it was like a weight
lifted
yeah.
off of you.
A weight.
You don't want to
literally.
hide anything anymore, and it makes you feel so much better. Though,
Exactly,
right?
and I was
and
like,
that builds the communication between you and your mom.
yeah, and I was like, she's gonna simmer in it, and she's gonna have days where she flips out about it, and she's gonna have days when she's not so okay with it, and then she's gonna go talk to all her friends about it, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
You know. And so I was like, hopefully her friends like just talk some sense into her. And like, it's not like she was totally against it. So I lucked out on that front. Cause I can't imagine what it would be like if my mom was totally against it and my dad was too. And
well, that would just be a more uphill battle for you.
right. But I was lucky in that I had the support of my cousins and I knew like my aunts and uncles, they didn't care.
Right.
In the sense that like, they weren't going to be negative about it. They were like, awesome. Good for you. Like I knew they weren't going to have an issue with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was literally just a matter of my mom and dad.
Yeah.
And my mom was already kind of halfway understanding. So it was just, you know, you'll meet Mike and like him and then we'll take it from there.
Right.
And
Do you have
so-
any other family members that have done what you've done where like they're dating outside the race?
No. Not that.
So do you understand why, like, when we started this podcast, why I like emphasize that, of why like it's so important that you have to look at yourself as like, it's very important that you broke that tradition and broke the norm, because now you've set the precedent for all of your family members to do the same.
Yeah, my cousins say that.
It's
They're like,
very
thanks
important.
for fighting the battle, Deesh.
No,
Pressure's off.
seriously. Like, you might look at that like when you heard it from your cousins and being like, haha, yeah, whatever. But like, it's a very important thing because now you've broken that norm. Because now when they want to start dating outside and they bring it to their parents could at least be like, all right, okay, like Disha did it, and like, all right, fine, okay. They'll accept it
yeah.
a lot more than having to do that uphill battle as well.
For sure. I mean, I don't think it'll be a cakewalk, but it's definitely going to be like, oh, we're already exposed to this, and
Yes.
it's okay.
That's all it is. It's
like,
it's
look,
exposure at the end
everything's
of the day.
okay. Like, shit hasn't totally hit the fan.
Right.
Like,
It's exposure.
I
at
feel
the
like
end of
they
the day.
make it seem like the world is going to come down. And it's like, no, like Mike comes to all of like our Indian holidays and he wears Indian clothes when he has to. And
Yeah.
he, you know, loves our culture and embraces it. And like, I get it. Our, you know, parents came to America at a time when like being Indian wasn't cool. Like now it's like cool to wear Indian clothes. When I was a kid, I got made fun of for smelling funny and bringing weird food to school for lunch.
Right.
And
I still get made
they
fun of that.
came at a time where it was even more strange.
Right.
That like, oh, like, why do you have that red dot on your head? Or like, why does your food smell funny? Or like, you know, their whole culture was like in a box. Like you went home and in those four walls, you watched Bollywood movies and you spoke Gujarati and you like, you know, did all those things and ate Indian food. And then when you walked out, you had to be American. Because if you didn't fit in and you didn't integrate into society, people would judge you or people would do horrible things. You know what I mean? After 9/11, plenty of people had experiences that were horrible by the way that people reacted to them just because they couldn't tell the difference between like a terrorist and a brown person. It's like not the same. But, you know, they just assume like, oh, you're Middle Eastern. And so everyone that's Middle Eastern must be a terrorist. And it's like obviously not true. But when they came, that's what it was. And so that fear of not being accepted is just what they lived in when they moved to this country.
Right.
And then we grew up in a world where like when we were kids, like we got made fun of or whatever. But like as we've moved on, like we have American friends and we've, you know, taught them about Indian culture and they're fine with it. And like by the time we're here today, like all my bridesmaids, like I had like my cousins were my bridesmaids, but most of my bridesmaids weren't Indian, and they were all for it. They wore the Indian clothes and they did the dances and they came to all the events and they had so much fun, and my family was honestly like shocked.
Okay, you know what it is? I think you just said it. Is I think one of the biggest fear for Indian people of like interracial relationships is that they feel like if you dated Mike, okay, hold on, let me reword it. Their biggest fear is that eventually you're gonna lose your roots of being Indian, but you just have to prove to them that like, yes, I'm dating somebody that's white, but you see it. He's putting effort into trying to learn the language and trying to go to Garba and trying to do the religion thing and whatever. And maybe he's compromising for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they're okay with it now. Is like, okay, at least this guy's not like a douchebag who just came in and he's like changing my daughter into like being full American, forgetting her roots and stuff. But like, at least he's making an effort. And I think that's what parents want to see.
Yeah.
Is that no matter who you date, at least they're putting the effort into trying to blend in with your culture.
It's not the safety of knowing that like, oh, you married someone who understands you and knows where you're coming from, and like, you know, how are they going to understand our food and our culture? And it's like the same way you understood pizza and bagels when you moved here.
Yeah.
You put the effort in, you learned English, and you integrated into society, and you still held on, and you don't have to hold on so tight, but like they can do the same thing if they want to. And if you're with the right person, like all the things that are important to you will probably be important to them. Yeah. And I think because our parents didn't date, they don't know what that's like to establish a relationship besides husband and wife.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You know, where like making this work is optional because you're just dating. Like if you don't like each other, you can break up.
Right.
They're in a world where like you made it work.
It's a one-way deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no ticket out.
Right.
Because like divorce is like a whole other taboo in our culture.
Right.
And, you know, so they don't know what it's like to choose to date someone that is so different from you and learn about what's important to them and then make it work and then get to a point where, you know, where we are like we're married.
Right.
So it's very different for them. And it's learning to explain it to them sometimes.
But I mean, like we said earlier, is like the most important thing is exposure at the end of the day. Is like exposure and helping them understand that like you as my parents should understand of all people that like I'm not gonna just bring this person into my life and kind of like and not have them at least be sympathetic and try to understand our culture. Like I'm gonna try to bring somebody that's understanding of it and they're gonna try to blend in some way with our culture, so they're not, you know, I'm still looking out for you guys at the end of the day. Like, yes, I'm going to find someone that I love, but like, yo, I care about you guys. So yes, I'm still thinking about you in the back of my head. It's not like I'm dating some Spanish girl or like a white girl and then just forgetting about who I am as a person. I identify as an Indian American and I'm going to keep it that way. Right. I have one last question for you before we close it out for your listeners is what message or advice would you want to give to all your viewers listeners? I'm used to YouTube.
That's a good question. I think if you found the right person, just do it. Don't even...
Kids, break the norm.
Yeah, just do it.
Your parents will be upset at you for like 3-4 months, but they will get over it if they love you.
Yeah, I think a lot of our parents are full of a lot of somewhat empty threats because I was... but like my mom would even say like, if you ever bring home someone who's not Indian, like... we'll never talk to you again. And I'm like, okay.
And then I bring them home and they're like, oh, I like her.
Yeah, like they almost want to instill that fear in you, hoping you won't do it. And you know what?
But then when you actually stand up for yourself, they're just kind of like, okay, I'm not going to do anything about this. Like, they're not going to do anything.
Yeah, I think you have to be, one, ready for whatever's going to happen. Because I definitely, not only did I wait to be in a position where Mike understood, like, we would eventually one day get married, but that I was in a situation that, God forbid, worst case scenario, they kicked me out of the house that night, that I was financially independent, that I could afford to move out.
Mentally prepared for this.
And mentally prepared for it.
Yeah.
You know, like put up everything you need to feel secure in your decision and that no threat they make is going to stop it.
Right.
And, you know, most likely it's not going to be as horrible as you think it's going to be. It might. Don't get me wrong.
It's communication.
It might. I can't speak for another person's family and their parents. And you might maybe get kicked out. And that would be horrible. And I hope that doesn't happen. But
shit, you better have a degree.
I put myself in a position.
Better have a job.
Yeah. I put myself in a, corner where it didn't matter what happened. Because
Right.
I knew, Mike would stand by me even when shit hit the fan. Because guess what? There were points where, like, my dad flipped out on him and he had to sit there and hear it.
Really?
And it
Wow.
was not great. But we had such a solid foundation before going into this that going through all of that with our families only brought Mike and I closer together and, like, reaffirmed what we built for each other and, like, solidified our decision to be together. And then when Mike was ready, he proposed and, like, all of that stuff. But just knowing that I was with someone who's kind of, like, gonna weather it out with me.
Right.
And eventually, like, everyone simmered down and everybody, like, built their bridge and got over it. And we moved forward. And, every now and then my mom would be like, so, like, when are you guys going to get married? I'm like, when Michael proposes. And, like, my mom, I took it for granted that, like, my mom even knew what that meant. And she's like, what do you mean propose?
Oh, right.
She literally didn't know, like, the part where they get down on.
Wait a certain amount of time. And, like,
He's like, so just tell him to propose. I'm like, no, Mom, that's not how it works.
Right.
And she's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, he has to decide. And, like, he'll get down on one knee with the ring. And she's like, I don't understand. She literally, like, the amount
I can
of
understand that, right? Yeah.
had to explain, like, what a proposal is. And she's like, well, when is he going to propose? I'm like, I don't know. It's a surprise. She goes, why is it a surprise? And I'm like, I don't. Some days it was just, like, repeating the same things over and over again. But, like, we got through it. It's okay. And the thing is, like, eventually, like, the people that matter most will always be there, whether that be your friends or your cousins or other family members.
Right.
Like, there will always be people who understand where you're coming from. And eventually, hopefully, your parents do too. But even if they don't, at least you could say, like, you did this for yourself.
That's the most important thing is, like,
and you're happy. And
you're happy.
And it's okay. It's okay if maybe they're not proud of you. I think we put so much pressure on ourselves.
As long as you're proud of yourself and you're happy with what you're doing, nobody matters. I'm sorry. I get it. It's your parents. Trust me. I have parents too. But, like, seriously, yeah. I'm focused more on my happiness and what I'm doing and me making the right decisions. And, if my parents don't accept it and they really don't accept it, even after me making the effort to try to communicate to them, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. You'll get around eventually.
Yeah, they'll eventually find and maybe have somebody who's better at explaining things than you are. I had, like, my cousins and, like, my aunts and uncles who can speak to them on
your behalf.
On my behalf in a way that maybe they understand better than the way I could explain it. And so that helped.
I know, like, the way I'm speaking, it seems so, like, hard-headed, and I know people are going to listen and be
no,
like,
but you have
you
to
can
be.
say that because you're a guy, but it's like, I know, but I mean, just as I'm trying to speak to, like, our female audience, I want to speak to the male audience too. If there is, if you have a bunch of guys, like, listening too, it's like
the 3 people listening to this podcast.
Right. Yeah. Right. But it's like, it's unorthodox the way I think about it. And maybe it's, like, privilege. Maybe it's too American the way I think about it. It's like, look, if your parents don't accept it, even after you trying to make a conscious effort for them to understand, and even though you're trying, it's not like we're not stupid. It's like our parents raised us and we were raised right. And it's like, for the one time that I want to be happy and I'm making the right decision, you can't accept it. And if that's the case, then, like, even after me making a conscious effort to help you understand and compromise with you, if you still don't accept it, then fine. It's okay. I'm still going to do what I love to do. I'm still going to be happy at the end of the day and focus on myself. Yeah. You guys can come around if you guys come around, Of course, my parents are the most important thing in my life, but your happiness has to be the most important thing.
And the person you end up with forever.
For the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You
that was something where I wasn't going to compromise. I was like, school, whatever.
Right.
But I could always go back and do that again.
For those of you listening, though, definitely, there's still so much to talk about. There's still so many questions to ask you, like religion, language barriers, your children. I know I don't want to bring that up. I know it's super awkward,
baby.
But, like, just things to, like, think about in the very, very far future, right? And how that could affect with having mixed children and having a mixed lifestyle and stuff like that. So all of that stuff I'm going to ask you
for next episode.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I know you're gonna be excited for that, and for the people that are listening are gonna be excited for that. Just get more like an in-depth perspective and opinion from your host, Disha. And if I make it to the second episode, or if I don't, I'll pass on these great questions for the person that's gonna ask you next. But you want to close it out?
Yeah, so if you want to find us online, I'm Dishes by Dishes on Instagram. So dishes like the word DISHES, BYDISHES. Dishes by Dishes. And you can find us there. That's where this podcast is going to launch. And if you have questions, slide into my DMs.
And if you're hungry, slide into our DM.
Also that. It is also a food Instagram. It's just like Disha's creative content corner. So
it's
definitely.
the best of both worlds. You get advice and food.
Basically.
How could you hate that?
Get a cookie recipe and leave some questions.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm not going to leave any plug because it's okay. I don't really care about that. I'm just honestly grateful for even being a part.
Do the plug.
You want me to do a
Shameless plugs.
Nah, okay.
If you want more of a keel.
Okay, you could find me at Bickering Brothers Podcast. I do a podcast with one of my best friends, Joe. So you could check that out. But besides that, I'm just grateful to be on this podcast and be able to give you guys a guy's perspective on the harsh lifestyle that we all live as being South Asians.
So we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for listening.
Peace out.
Bye.